and welcome to Newsline, coming to you live from the studios of RMIT in Melbourne. I'm Will Watson.
And I'm Alexander Blaine.
Over the next hour, we'll bring you all the news of the day and some special reports from our team of reporters, including a look at incidents of young people in nursing homes.
But first, the news headlines. The Fair Work Commission has announced a 3% rise in the minimum wage from July 1st. The new ruling will see over 2 million Australian workers earning an extra $21.60 a week.
Special Counsel Robert Mueller has broken his silence on the Trump-Russia investigation. Speaking publicly for the first time since the investigation started, Mueller declined to clear President Trump of obstruction of justice. We'll have a special report on that later in the program.
And Papua New Guinea has a new Prime Minister tonight. Former Finance Minister James Marape has been chosen after weeks of turmoil in the government. Former Prime Minister Peter O'Neill resigned yesterday, but surprisingly nominated himself once again for the position of leader. However, Marape won the challenge with a comfortable majority.
Israel will see a second election on September 2nd after incumbent Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu failed to form a coalition. Netanyahu failed to meet the midnight deadline last night, casting a cloud over his future as Prime Minister.
And in sport, Richmond will receive a boost this weekend with skipper Trent Cotchin returning after 2 months on the sidelines with a hamstring injury. Coach Damien Hardwick said Cotchin ticked all the boxes and is a certain start for tomorrow's clash with North Melbourne. We'll have more for you on that in sport with Zach Standish.
It's time to take a look at today's political news now with our correspondent Jonathan McGrath.
Thanks, guys. 20 Sri Lankan asylum seekers have been sent back to the country after their boat was intercepted en route to Australia last week. The boat left in early May, shortly after the deadly Easter bombing attacks in Sri Lanka. Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton says the government is worried more boats are heading for Australia. So far, 186 asylum seekers have been sent back to Sri Lanka since the Coalition won government in 2013. The new Labor leader Anthony Albanese and the Labor caucus have been meeting to decide the makeup of the party's front bench. Western Sydney MP Ed Husic has stepped down from the front bench, making way for former New South Wales Premier Christina Keneally. Labor MP Don Farrell will also step down as Senate Deputy Leader to ensure a gender balance in the party's leadership positions. And Kevin Rudd says suggestions that Queensland is responsible for Labor's election loss is a whole load of baloney. The former Labor Prime Minister rejects the notion that the state is unwelcoming of progressive ideas. Queensland has had a Labor state government for 25 of the past 30 years. Later in the show, we have Billy Phillips talking to politics expert Kathy Greenfield about big policy and the importance of personality in political campaigns. Back to you, Will and Alexander.
Thanks, Jonathan. Right now, across Australia, more than 6,000 young people are living in nursing homes. 2 years ago, a disability services company started one of Australia's first housing programs focused on moving young people out of aged care facilities. Julia Ranieri has the story.
Cooking up a storm in the kitchen with Mum, Bindi Fitzgerald, is one of Alice's many passions, and living independently is another goal Alice's mother hopes that she will achieve.
I could live with my daughter for forever, but it wouldn't be fair on her. My other kids, we grow up, and half the course is you move out.
With the current specialist disability accommodation placements and the NDIS's existing projected demand, the supply of housing needs to grow by at least 60%.
For the first time, people have the capacity to move out of home because they have portable and adequate support. Yeah. So we're looking at quite a different level of demand than we've had before, and no, we're not even close to meeting it yet.
But now, teaming up with disability service provider Gen U, Empowered Livability has built the first of 25 specialist disability share houses. Co-director Gaurav Gupta explains its benefits.
Help young people with disability, people under 65, really do two things: not be homeless and not live in nursing homes.
The property in Tarneet not only comes with assisted 24-hour care, but also boasts to provide a state-of-the-art and well-equipped space for those who move in.
To live in caravans, hotels, facilities, really the wrong place for them to live in. Give them the opportunities that a normal person without disability would get.
More than half of the young people living under the same roof as aged care patients are under the age of 64. But it's specialist homes like this one trying to bring that number down.
we all have different needs, and our kids who are, have disabilities are going to have very, very different needs to an old person who needs care.
And with the example of empowered livability, many now that questioned where they might go may have already found the perfect solution. Julia Ranieri, Newsline.
And now it's time to look across Australia and Australian domestic news with Danny Derbyshire.
Thank you, Alexander and Will. A Queensland man is fighting for his life after a fight broke out at a McDonald's drive-thru in Queensland last night. Police say two men aged 23 and 29 got out of their cars at the Yarrabilba McDonald's when the older man was allegedly punched in the face, hitting his head on the pavement. It is unknown if the men were known to each other. The 23-year-old man has been charged and will appear in the Beenleigh Magistrates Court today. A teenage boy has died and 5 have been left injured after a horror crash in Brisbane's suburb of Rothwell. Police allege the vehicle was stolen and was being driven by a 14-year-old boy when it ran a red light and collided with another vehicle containing a young family. The fatal crash marks the 10th life lost on Queensland roads since Monday night. And in Central Australia, station owners say the number of feral camels are on the rise, with owners reporting significant damage on their properties. Pastoralists are calling for better feral animal management as the responsibility is currently left in the hands of landowners. In other news, the Gold Coast is becoming a nursery for humpback whales and no one is sure why. Traditionally, these whales give birth in areas along the Great Barrier Reef, but researchers have noticed a shift 1,000 kilometres south. Researchers suspect the behavioural change could be due to shifting ocean conditions. That's a look at news across Australia today. Back to you, Alexander and Will.
Thanks, Danielle. Now, 3 teenagers have been arrested overnight following a violent 2-day crime spree across Melbourne's suburbs. Harrison White is at the Spencer Street Police Station with more. Harrison, what can you tell us about the crimes?
Yes, just struggled to hear what you were saying then. But basically, there's some breaking news over the past 2 hours. There have been a total now of 6 arrests throughout Melbourne. There was 3 last night, and the 3 have been caught remaining today.
Well, the crimes were quite widespread as well, we understand.
That's correct. It was everywhere from the north, the east, and the west. It was basically a triangle of terror that had been conducted over the week. And basically, there was no age discrepancy. It was old and young. It was carjackings, home invasions. It truly was a big week for Vic Pol, and I'm sure they'll be very, very happy to get 6 arrests here in total.
And Harrison, police broke protocol, releasing images of underage offenders. Why did they take this measure?
Yes, that is correct. And you can almost say that was an indication of just the horrific nature of the crimes. There was knives, there was poles. It really was horrific for everyone involved. And basically, this protocol was broken. Traditionally, you do not release the names of children, so anyone under the age of 18. But Victoria Police sought to the Children's Court to get those names released. And I believe they'll be very happy today. And most likely that could have been the cause for the arrests.
Thanks, Harrison. Harrison White reporting there. Well, it's been 3 years since Victoria's Royal Commission into Family Violence, but dozens of recommendations are yet to be implemented. As Tyson Whelan reports, domestic violence advocates say the time for change is now.
Rakaya O'Donnell would have turned 28 last month.
Rakaya was a very bright, bubbly and enthusiastic person. Sometimes people would say a bit too much.
But in 2013, her life was tragically cut short at the hands of her abusive partner, Nelson Lai.
He apparently tipped all the bullets out of the gun, closed the barrel, started waving the gun around. The gun went off. He didn't think there was any bullets in there, but there was, and the bullet went straight through her temple, apparently instantly killing her on the spot.
Rakaya's long-term abuse was one of many instances across Victoria which led to the 2015 Royal Commission into Family Violence. The Commission recommended changes to sentencing, overhauling the intervention regime and altering the court process for victims. But Victoria's Women's Legal Service, among other organisations, say that the 107 unlegislated recommendations and the current administration of services is simply not meeting the mark.
I, for one, am not satisfied that the governance and evaluation processes in relation to the implementation of the Royal Commission findings are adequate.
Jessie O'Donnell believes the government needs to completely rethink the justice system that so tragically let his sister down.
You know, when you're looking at the definition between murder and manslaughter, you have to be found guilty of the intent to kill. That is the difference. But if you're throwing at the jury that you didn't know what you were doing because you're on drugs, that throws doubt as to your intentions at the time.
Over $2 billion has been allocated by the state government since the Royal Commission, yet experts say the time has come for a long-term vision to stop family violence.
They believe that it's a done deal because they've put so much money in that the problem's just going to be sorted, and I'm afraid that's not necessarily what's going to happen unless, you know, they really keep their eyes on the ball and they really keep working together to make sure that, you know, the complexity of the issues are understood and acted on.
There's definitely a lot more that could be done, and I think at this stage it's just all words, unfortunately.
At the Supreme Court in Melbourne, Tyson Whelan, Newsline.
And we'll be right back after this break with your finance news.
Welcome back to Newsline.
And now it's time for a look at the finance markets across the world with Hannah Day.
Thanks, guys. Well, trade tensions are still the name of the game today, as strain between the US and China are affecting commodities across the board. Recessions in several major international economies are also causing concern. According to BNP Paribas, overseas oil prices are suffering, but gold is beginning to gain. Back here in Australia, gold is 0.11%, but crude oil is up 0.35%. And it was down this morning as the ASX dropped significantly on opening after losses on Wall Street overnight. All sectors were in the red within the first half hour of trade this morning. The hardest hit were tech sectors and healthcare shares. The Australian All Ords is down 0.84%, and all four big banks fell, with Westpac dropping 0.68%. The Aussie dollar has improved slightly since yesterday, buying 69.3 US cents. The euro is trading at just over 62 cents, and the Japanese yen is at 76 yen to the dollar. That's it from me. Back to you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Hannah. Moonee Valley Council has delayed the redevelopment of the Aberfeldy Sports Club for almost 10 years. Other clubs in the area have received council funding, but this growing sports club is yet to receive their share of support. Alexandra Middleton reports.
This growing sports club doesn't have the room.
It certainly is too small. We don't have enough toilet facilities, change room facilities. We're trying to share rooms between men and women in between games. The roof leaks constantly.
Aberfeldy Sports Club at Clifton Park has wanted new club rooms for over 10 years. They've been working with Moonee Valley Council to develop a master plan, which includes the redevelopment of their Jack Chalmers Pavilion. A redevelopment would help facilitate their 1,200 participants, as well as the growth of junior and senior women's football.
On that master plan, they agreed that we did need new rooms, and originally that was scheduled for 2020.
Moonee Valley Mayor Narelle Sharp has said the council clearly supports the redevelopment of the pavilion at Clifton Park, but at this stage, the works have been scheduled for 2027 or 2028. This is at least 7 years later than Aberfeldy expected.
Extremely disappointing, yeah.
The council has provided the women's teams with access to Aberfeldy West Park during the winter months, while Clifton Park awaits redevelopment. Mayor Sharp has said the council needs to prioritise redevelopments accordingly, taking into account facilities with the poorest conditions, meaning a number of other pavilion redevelopments have been put ahead of Clifton Park. Of the 9 sporting clubs in the Moonee Valley municipality, every other club has had pavilion updates or improvements since Clifton Park was last invested in. Some of them have even had more than one, while Aberfeldy hasn't had any.
Our rooms are pretty small compared to like other clubs. They have room to like kick the ball around, and we don't. Yeah, other clubs have been updating their facilities and they look pretty good, so Abba should.
They're quite old and it's time for new ones, I think.
Aberfeldy is hopeful council plans will change and they won't be waiting much longer. In Aberfeldy, Alexandra Middleton, Newsline.
And now we have Tyson Whelan here with the international news.
Well, thanks, guys. Good afternoon. Papua New Guinea's parliament has elected James Marape as the country's new Prime Minister. Today's vote was prompted by the former Prime Minister Peter O'Neill resigning yesterday after losing majority support of his colleagues. Marape's election draws to a close a long period of political instability in the Pacific nation. Israel will return to the polls in September, just 5 months since the country had a general election. For the first time in Israeli history, no coalition was able to be formed, which forced Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to support a new vote. Netanyahu's Likud party secured exactly 50% of the seats in the Israeli Knesset, but when negotiations broke down, it became clear that the only way to break the deadlock would be to have another election. Police in Bangladesh have charged 16 people with murder in relation to the suspected killing of a 19-year-old student, Nusrat Rafi. The woman filed a sexual assault complaint against her school principal earlier this year. When she refused to withdraw the complaint, it's alleged the school's headmaster organised for her to be doused in kerosene and burnt alive. Special Counsel Robert Mueller has spoken publicly for the first time since his appointment as prosecutor in the Russian election interference investigation. While Mueller mostly repeated the language of his 448-page report, he strikingly said, quote, "If we had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so." Democratic presidential hopefuls Senator Cory Booker and Kirsten Gillibrand joined Mayor Pete Buttigieg in calling for the president's impeachment following the surprise press conference. And that's your international news headlines. I'll be joining Alexandra and Will on the panel later to talk more about the Mueller report. But until then, it's back to you.
And we're looking forward to that, Tyson. Now a report from our international affairs reporter, Rob Harrison, on punk rock in Las Vegas.
Punk Rock Bowling is an annual music festival that takes place in downtown Las Vegas for 3 days in late May. This year, 120 bands will play, ranging from up-and-coming bands to scene favourites such as Rancid and The Descendants. Each day, there is a bowling tournament that takes place before the music. To ensure the tournament is fun and inclusive, there is a strict policy against pro bowlers entering. This year will be the 21st version of PRB and is said to be the biggest yet. For the first time ever, there will be 2 stages alternating constant music over the course of the festival. Each day is said to have a crowd of 15,000 people with tickets sold out a week in advance. Due to the amount of people travelling to attend the festival, many restaurants have extended their opening hours. 17 sideshows including 55 bands will take place alongside the festival. These bands will perform in 4 smaller venues across Vegas after the festival has finished each day. The sideshows have a mix of bands who are and are not also playing at the festival. Matching the themes of the music is an art show with art and photography from local artists in the scene. Some of the art is available to buy at the festival from the artists themselves. As a means of limiting plastic waste, keep cups are to be given with all alcoholic drinks that can be returned after the festival. Of course, the keep cups can be kept as a reminder of the event. The festival is about punk music, it is not about interruption and exclusion, with noise stopping at 11 o'clock each night. This is due to noise curfew laws as well as the family-friendly atmosphere. This is Rob Harrison for Newsline.
Interesting stuff, but that's not all on the arts circuit. Right now, we have Michaela Van Loon with your arts news.
Thanks, boys. Adam's Goods film is set to open the Melbourne International Film Festival. The AFL Legends documentary, The Australian Dream, shares the emotional and psychological impact of the persistent booing from crowds. The Sydney Swan star talks of the events leading up to his departure from the game and Australia's national identity. The film festival begins on August the 1st. Guns N' Roses' lead bassist has disputed claims that the rock and roll band were sexist in some of their hit songs. In an interview with Yahoo, Duff McKagan says the songs have been misunderstood. He also says it was super brave of Guns N' Roses to portray a prejudiced character. And TV personality Ellen DeGeneres has opened up about her sexual abuse she endured as a teenager. In an interview with David Letterman, DeGeneres spoke about how her stepfather insisted on touching her breast multiple times. The touching started after her mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. She has spoken out about her experience because she doesn't want other girls to have to go through such abuse. In other news, long-lost footage of the Beatles performing on Top of the Pops in 1966 will be shown for the first time in 50 years. The footage was recovered by experts and shows the band playing Paperback Writer. And that's all I've got for you today. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Michaela. Well, in an age dominated by digital downloads and streaming services, you may be surprised that DVD rental stores still exist. Sophie Jacobson reports on how these few remaining stores hold a valuable place in today's world.
Once upon a time, every town had a DVD rental store. Decades on, and that world looks very different. According to industry analyst Ibisworld, the DVD rental industry has shrunk by 28% each year since 2014.
The last time I rented a DVD was probably when I was like 6.
Maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. 10 years ago at least.
This, however, has not stopped Bill, owner of Network Video in Sandringham. His DVD rental store is among one of the last in Melbourne.
We've been operating here for 25 years this July, so we opened July 1st, 1994. Our main genres would be art house, children's and TV series, and we've got approximately 9,300, I think at last count.
Despite Netflix being such a dominant player in the entertainment world, Bill says that they still have an extremely loyal clientele.
A lot of young families with children, a lot of seniors use the library as well, and people just looking for a unique film where they can't find it anywhere else.
The DVD rental market leader, Franchise Entertainment Group, has virtually given up on stores, pinning its hopes on what it calls kiosks, DVD renting machines. These kiosks stock 100% new releases, as they see this is the way to stay in the market.
Major production companies choose not to give Netflix the rights to stream new movies, as they make more revenue through DVD sales.
So people want newer movies that have just come out, say for example Instant Family, where you can't get that on Netflix at all. So TV series, yeah, people want to binge on them. Game of Thrones, nearly all out again. People want to see the old ones before the new one that's come out. And children, yeah, lots of children's movies. People, young families come in with their children that want to watch what they watched growing up.
The online world is without a doubt changing this industry, but I don't think people are ready to fully say goodbye to DVDs. Sophie Jacobson in Melbourne for Newsline.
That's very interesting. I mean, I don't know about you, Alex, but I mean, everyone just gets their videos off Netflix now.
Oh, well, you know, I think the joy of like Video Easy and your blockbusters is finding the one that isn't scratched, you know? You can't get that on Netflix.
Well, and it's a good experience, isn't it? I mean, going into a Video Easy or going into a Blockbuster and you can browse all the shelves and you get the smell of popcorn and all that.
I mean, popcorn, I think you're talking about a cinema.
Well, no, I think it's devastating that, you know, we no longer have all these great video stores that we can just wander into and like, that's a movie night, you know? You go down with your parents and it's a movie night when you're in the store. Whereas nowadays, I mean, it's just Netflix and, you know, it's Netflix individual and you're just by yourself. And
Amazon, everyone's getting in on it.
Yeah.
All right, but we'll be right back after this break.
Welcome back to Newsline. Recapping the day's headlines, the Fair Work Commission has announced a 3% rise in the minimum wage from July 1st. The new ruling will see over 2 million Australians earning an extra $21.60 a week.
Special Counsel Robert Mueller has broken his silence on the Trump-Russia investigation. Speaking publicly for the first time since the investigation started, Mueller declined to clear President Trump of obstruction of justice. We'll be joined by political correspondent Tyson Whelan in the studio later in the program to discuss the Mueller updates.
Papua New Guinea has a new Prime Minister tonight. Former Finance Minister James Marape has been chosen after weeks of turmoil in the government. Former Prime Minister Peter O'Neill resigned yesterday, but surprisingly nominated himself once again for the position of leader. However, Marape won the challenge with a comfortable majority.
And Israel will hold a second election on September 2nd after incumbent Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu failed to form a coalition. Netanyahu failed to meet the midnight deadline last night, casting a cloud over his future as Prime Minister.
And in sport, all eyes will be on England as the Cricket World Cup kicks off tonight with hosts England taking on South Africa. We'll have more details for you on that in sport with Zach Standish very soon. Well, homelessness has taken up a large portion of the headlines this week after the horrific killing of a 25-year-old woman, Courtney Heron, who was homeless at the time she was murdered and had been sleeping rough. Our reporter Aidan Dawkins is at a youth services group which provides help to young people in Courtney's position. Aidan, this group is about to open a new crisis accommodation centre. What kind of support do they provide?
Yeah, so we're at the front now, and they're celebrating today. They've opened after a $90 million redevelopment, and with that redevelopment, they've got 18 new crisis emergency beds for young people. Along with this, they've got their usual services where they've got doctors and dentists and lawyers to help give advice to people suffering homelessness. There's also bathrooms, food available 24/7, and it's just a place where they can come and connect with the help that they need.
So, Aidan, is youth homelessness a big issue in Melbourne?
Well, Front Yard says that out of every 5 Victorians suffering homelessness, 2 of them are people under the age of 25. So it's a pretty big deal, especially when we look at the 2016 census that showed over 24,000 Victorians are homeless every night. And it's hard to really, that's a stat, but it's hard to measure because homelessness is so vast. There's from people rough sleeping on the streets, that the typical picture of what we imagine homelessness to look like, but there's also 10% of people who are couch surfing, and a further 60% who are just in really overcrowded accommodation and not in the safest position.
So what are some of the causes of youth homelessness?
Well, in homelessness in general, there's the public perception that it's brought upon by mental health issues or drug and alcohol dependencies. And it's just not the case. Research shows that it's actually homelessness that brings these on as a side effect. You look at the issues, reports say that it's actually 25% of cases, it's family or domestic violence that, has people feeling unsafe in their accommodation and, choosing homelessness. If we look at some of the other, there's financial difficulties, relationship, family breakdowns, and just general housing crisis, which is a big one at the moment when we look that there's not really any affordable housing in Melbourne.
Well, so if there's not much affordable housing, what is the government doing to combat the issue?
So between January and March, there was only 66 approvals for public housing applicants in Victoria, and they're saying that this is for the year before that. Sorry, it was only an average of 30 people being approved for public housing every month. So the government's pledged to build 1,000 new public housing units by 2022, and they're also planning to upgrade public housing. But doing so will see 3% of residents displaced. There's been concerns raised by the Greens and service providers about the Andrews government selling public housing and land that could be used for public housing. Service providers are calling for more houses to be built as soon as possible, because in the end, crisis and emergency services, like this place, it's just a band-aid. We need long-term solutions. Yeah.
Aidan, the weather is, of course, getting quite cold at the moment. Where can people go to seek assistance?
Yeah, so we're here in King Street, and I think this is probably the best place for young people to come to. So pop in and see Front Yard. They've got, as we said, all these different services that can really help people get back on their feet for people aged between 16 and 25. There's many other places for people outside this demographic. As I said, 25% of homelessness is caused by domestic or family violence, and it's really important if people are experiencing that they actually reach out and get the help. You can do that by calling 1-800-RESPECT, and they can guide you through that process. For people in the city, the Salvation Army on Burke Street runs a drop-in centre cafe, and it's open at night as well for people trying to escape the cold. And they've got food, you've got a chance to socialise, and also get connected to different support services. So there's a lot around. You've got to, come and see people.
Well, thanks, Aidan, for that cross. Now joining us at the desk is Zach Standish with the sports news.
Thanks, guys. Richmond coach Damien Harbeck has confirmed that skipper Trent Cotchin will make his return against North Melbourne tomorrow night. Cotchin has not played since injuring his hamstring in round 3 against GWS and will be a welcome addition to the 4th place Tigers. And just 5 weeks after a sickening quad injury, St Kilda captain Jaron Geary looks set to make a shock return for his side's landmark encounter against Port Adelaide in China. The ICC Cricket World Cup begins tonight, with hosts and heavy favourites England taking on a strong South African side at the Oval in London. Australia will kick off their World Cup defence against Afghanistan in Bristol on Saturday. 4 Aussies remain in the French Open main draw after young guns Alex de Minaur and Alexei Popyrin crashed out of the tournament in the 2nd round. The number 21 seed de Minaur was no match for unseeded Spaniard Pablo Carreño Busta, going down in straight sets. 8 seed Ashley Barty and former US Open champion Sam Stosur headline tonight's action for the Australians. Chelsea have dismantled Arsenal 4-1 in the Europa League final in Azerbaijan. It was expected to be his last game for the club. Star Eden Hazard scored a double to help the Blues win their 2nd Europa League title. And the Golden State Warriors have landed in Toronto ahead of their NBA Finals matchup with the Raptors. Star forward Kevin Durant travelled with the team, but is expected to miss the first 2 games with a calf injury. The series begins tomorrow at 11 a.m. Australian Standard Time. Walking basketball is the latest innovation to get older people, less active older people moving. As Jonathan McGrath reports, the program has huge growth in Victoria.
A low-impact, slow-paced form of basketball is the newest way to stay fit and healthy. Specially designed for older people and people suffering from injury, walking basketball is a safe, easy way for participants to play the sport in a stress-free environment. Here at the Bulleen Boomers Basketball Club, a 4-week trial is underway.
It's probably an element of the community we've neglected in some regards, or there wasn't an opportunity till now. But from our point of view, it's the more people you've got involved in the club, the more the courts are being used, the more relevant you are to the community, and the more good you can do.
The program goes for an hour and a half each session and features a number of simple drills and skills with a small game at the end.
I think there's obviously some physical benefits. There's some the activity level, the physical activities seems to be flexible to the participants' needs. Those that want to do more can do more. Those that have been more, maybe got less energy, will find their way.
The trial is expected to follow in the footsteps of other basketball clubs around Victoria, where walking basketball has already proven a hit. Basketball Victoria says the program has seen success and will continue to grow.
We've got a few programs throughout the state and throughout Melbourne, but we want more associations starting to look at this space.
Just 30 minutes of physical activity a day can reduce the risks associated with inactivity.
The program itself is quite flexible and can be great for people with a disability, people recovering from injury, older adults that might not be able to run up and down the court for domestic basketball.
Combining walking with basketball helps to improve aerobic fitness, blood circulation and bone health. The slow-paced, less competitive nature of the game provides a fun way for those less active to stay healthy. After the trial ends this month, Bulleen hopes that walking basketball will continue to run. Jonathan McGrath in Bulleen, Newsline.
That's really great stuff. Zach, while we've got you here, NBA Finals, of course, Raptors and Golden State. Any predictions?
Yeah, so the Raptors are looking pretty good, winning their last 4 games against the Bucks. The Golden State Warriors will be a big task for them, but I'm going to go against the trend. I'm going to say that the Raptors get it done in 7 games, and Kawhi Leonard continues his good form with the Finals MVP, guys.
Do you think the whack of LeBron James in the Eastern Conference has helped them out a fair bit?
Oh, it certainly has helped. It was dubbed LeBronto for a bit there. He absolutely killed the Raptors for a while. So no, definitely handy that he's out of the Eastern Conference for Toronto, and yeah, hopefully that the Raptors get it done.
Fantastic. Thanks very much,
Thanks,
Zach.
Coming up after the break, we have Billy Phillips talking to Professor Kathy Greenfield about the recent election. See you then.
Welcome back to Newsline.
In Western Victoria, culturally significant trees are set to be cut down to make way for a new highway upgrades. As Gabriella Payne reports, traditional owners are trying to protect their sacred sites from the state government's planned roadworks.
Vehicles have been passing through this landscape on the Western Highway for years, but plans to upgrade it in a bid to improve road safety have overlooked the area's important cultural ties. People have been camped beside the highway underneath these ancient sacred trees in an effort to protect them from destruction.
Firstly, we're not protesters because these are our homelands. These homelands have been connected to us for thousands and thousands of years.
The state government's plans to upgrade the Western Highway include the removal of 3,000 trees, some of which are sacred birthing trees, with more than 50 generations born inside their hollows. The state government announced updated highway plans in February to protect 2 of these culturally significant trees. However, to the traditional custodians, this compromise, although a step in the right direction, is not what they were hoping for.
For me personally, I've come to make a stance to say that we are going to stand here and protect our cultural heritage.
A recent decision in the federal court has ground work to a halt on the Western Highway duplication, as Major Roads Projects Victoria waits for ministerial approval.
It's worth keeping in context. The population growth for Melbourne and Victoria is just going to continue to increase.
The Western Highway is a notoriously dangerous stretch of road, with 11 fatalities recorded in the last 5 years.
By the duplication, we make it safer, we make it more accessible, and there's more efficiencies into the system, not only for those people going to Adelaide, not just those people and heavy vehicles going into the Western Victoria, but the actual local communities.
Zelenak Jubmara was arrested on site in late April and denied bail for allegedly assaulting police and other driving offences. He is set to appear at the Ararat Magistrates Court on May 27th. Gabriella Payne in Ararat for RMIT Newsline.
Like that, it is 18 to 5 now.
And now it's time to look at science with Thea Oakes.
Thanks, guys. More than 200 million people rely on meltwater from Asia's high mountain ranges, but the store of fresh water is shrinking. Water security in these areas could significantly decline in a matter of decades as glaciers are melting faster than they can be replenished by snow. The situation is getting worse as the global average temperature continues to rise. Taking a black hole's temperature is an impossible task, but scientists have conquered the next best thing. They've measured the temperature of a lab-made sonic black hole which traps sound instead of light. If the result holds up, it'll prove a prediction by cosmologist Stephen Hawking, who first proposed that black holes really aren't black. The research is being seen as an important milestone for cosmology. Climate change is creating a sour taste for Australian wine producers who will now have to adapt to changing weather conditions. Researchers have found that climatic patterns in the Indian and Pacific Oceans are influencing the grape flavour and form. Growers are being encouraged to prepare for the changing conditions in a bid to protect their crops. So that's what's new in the science world. Thanks, Alex and Will.
Thank you, Thea. Now, some Melbourne schools have decided to ban the use of mobile phones in classrooms. Danielle Derbyshire asks exactly how effective these measures can really be.
Mobile phones, a device we cannot seem to live without. With the electronic devices being a major distraction to students in the classroom, some Melbourne high schools are choosing to change their device policies.
Mobile phones are the ones that we lock away in lockers during the school day, just because they were becoming a bit of a distraction for the girls, and they're quite addictive.
British researchers have found that students in schools where mobiles were restricted during school hours performed better than students in schools where phone usage was not monitored.
The effect has been immediate and really, really positive. So we have seen girls borrowing sporting equipment at lunchtimes and recess and getting out there in the fresh air and the sunshine when it's sunshine. Now they're communicating in person, in real time, which is just fabulous to see.
Research by Roy Morgan shows that just over 1 million, or 9 out of every 10 Australian teenagers, own a mobile phone. Some schools are saying that banning is not the answer and instead are choosing to embrace the devices.
I think banning things speaks to a really punitive approach, that it's black and white, that if we do this, then this will solve that problem. And I think rarely in schools, because schools are about people, students and staff and parents. So it's rare that just saying black and white actually solves whatever the underlying problem is.
Some people argue they are also a safety tool for many students who catch public transport.
I think mobiles are an amazing piece of technology. We all know they're not just phones anymore. Once upon a time you used to make a phone call and you'd ring mum or dad and say, pick me up. They're about so much more now.
With researchers saying that restricting students' phone usage decreases the risk of cyberbullying, stress and predatory behaviour, there are no current plans by the Victorian government to implement a state ban on the devices in the classroom.
Although schools in Victoria are still allowed to set their own mobile phone policy, it is safe to say this is a discussion that will be followed by students on social media quite closely. Danielle Derbyshire in Melbourne for Newsline.
Well, after this short break, we'll have Billy Phillips and Professor Kathy Greenfield in the studio to chat about the recent election.
Welcome back to Newsline. I'm Billy Phillips. Today officially marks the beginning of Anthony Albanese's tenure as leader of the Federal Labor Party. Following Labor's defeat at the recent election, a lot of the rhetoric has concerned the failure of the party's campaign, particularly its big policy agenda. Albanese has promised a new direction for the party. I'm here with Kathy Greenfield, politics professor at RMIT University, to talk about what Labor did wrong and the importance of campaigning and personality as it pertains to voters. Welcome to the studio. There's been a lot of talk about the coalition winning the election on a foundation of almost zero policy. Some experts have pointed to Scott Morrison's campaigning as endearing him to voters better than Bill Shorten. Do you think to some degree voters, or some voters, are voting for the personality and not the policy?
That'd be a pretty sure bet to say that some voters are doing that. You've got policy and personality issues sort of circulating there as possible reasons for what happened 2 Saturdays ago. And I guess what I think is really interesting in this post-election time is really, from my vantage point, to watch everyone trying very hard, especially journalists, but all sorts of commentators as well as the parties themselves, to make sense of what happened. And so people trying to work out, was it the message, was it the messenger, was it the personality of Shorten or Morrison, was it the big vision and big policy? And I know quite a few people, I think, are quite reasonably getting worried that, there's a sense that there's already got to be a retraction or a retreat from the idea of having a policy-laden ALP or whatever political party. So that's not a direct answer. The thing that I think is really important, though, is that we don't try to, and I don't think the politicians, the political parties should try to either, work out the magic, the magic thing that gets you over the line. They've got to attend to all of those areas. And the other thing that's in play is that people are working really hard to try and work out, what did the people think? Were they voting for the personality, not the policy? And that's as much of a sideline and a trap to try and work out, what did the people think? There is no one the people. There's going to be a multitude of different reasons for voting in the ways that the vote happened. And going forward, the politicians need to recognise the way in which they're going to shape those future voting intentions.
So in light of that, do you think, for one last question, is there room for big policy moving forward, or do you think that, briefly, Labor should renege on that and move back to small policy approach moving forward?
There's absolutely room for a policy approach. If you call it big policy, that makes it sound like it's a big plan that's going to scare voters, that's a problem, but they should definitely be policy.
Thanks very much. That's Kathy Greenfield, Professor at RMIT University. Now we go to Willem Vanderen's report on a potential reorganisation of the A-League.
When the new Football Federation Australia Board was elected in November of last year, a primary mandate was to see its professional competition, the A-League, operate independently of the FFA. As it stands, all revenue generated by the A-League is collected by the FFA and then distributed among the various bodies it controls, including grassroots football and national teams. Under an independent system, the A-League clubs would retain a greater share of this revenue and reinvest it back into the league, in theory creating a stronger organisation. Fairfax reporter Michael Lynch believes this could be the way forward.
In general terms, yes. In the short term, an independent league should, I think, be able to move a lot more with autonomy on marketing, advertising and, if you like, generating new revenue streams. You know, there are a multitude of parties here, the clubs, the state federations, players' union, women's football, the FFA itself. There's a number of interested parties, all of whom are trying to stake a claim over certain aspects of the agreement.
Having employed a body called the New Leagues Working Group to consult with the various factions of the local game, it's become clear that the A-League clubs are divided on the makeup of the new league system. Dean Hennessy is a member of the AAFC, a body which represents clubs at all levels across Australia. He's concerned the A-League relies too heavily on the FFA to run independently.
I'm not sure whether we're mature enough at this stage to do that. Anything you want to try and create that's new and drive new revenue streams, you've got to have the backing, for me, of the football body, which is obviously the FFA.
A June 30 deadline has been set for all parties to reach an agreement. If they cannot compromise, the A-League is at risk of being mired in mediocrity for another season. Willem van Denderen in Melbourne for Newsline.
And now it's time for a look at Melbourne's weather with Julia Ranieri. Julia, yesterday was our coldest May day on record. Will the cold front be easing anytime soon?
Unfortunately not, guys. It's not getting any better. It's been quite dreary, cloudy and a wet day in Melbourne today. We only reached a top of 13 degrees and we had showers across the day. There's a possible chance of hail and thunderstorms from about now, along with southeasterly winds reaching up to 30 kilometres per hour this afternoon. The rain will not only be easing anytime soon, as there is a high chance of rainfall tomorrow, most likely in the morning, with our maximum only reaching up to 15 degrees. Similar patterns are occurring across the rest of the state. Geelong is sitting on a cool 17 degrees with showers, Laverton 16, Frankston 17 and Yarra Glen 15, with Mount Dandenong slipping into a chilly 11 degrees. Looking to the weekend, there will be a slightly lower chance of showers on Saturday, reaching up to a top of 15. Much of the same on Sunday, with showers persisting, again reaching just a top of 15. Earlier next week, we may see patches of sunlight. However, like this week's showers, they will persist. Monday reaching a maximum of 13 degrees. So don't put away those umbrellas quite yet, guys. You'll need them for the weekend. Back to you, Alexander and Will.
Thanks, Julia. Yeah, I think it might be time to head up to the ski slopes, Alex.
Oh, that could definitely be an option. I know Mount Buller could be a bit full this weekend. You're pushing your way through Melbourne supporters all the way through.
Oh yeah, I knew you had that joke lined up. No, I mean it's very early. I mean we've had a lot of snow for this time of year.
Well, be good skiing season ahead.
Do you do the skiing or do you do the tobogganing or what's your snow sport of choice?
A bit of snowboarding, you know. But that is definitely a grim forecast ahead. A lot of rain, rainy days.
Wet and dreary and disgusting, really. I think inside is going to be the place to be.
Yeah, it could be the perfect time to go visit your local DVD rental store.
Yeah. It could be, actually. It could be time to jump into the local block. No, Blockbuster's not around anymore. Did you know that?
Video Easy closed too. So
Video Easy. So it might be a Netflix. It might be a Netflix night. I think Netflix and popcorn and. Inside and rugging up and turning on the central heating and it'll be cold.
Sounds like you've got it sorted. But,
no, I mean that or the ski slopes would be another good option.
Ski slopes, yeah.
We might have to work our way through those Melbourne supporters, but I'm sure we'll have a lot of time on ski slopes.
That
is all we have time for, unfortunately, this evening for Newsline. We've got plenty more tomorrow and Newsline on Friday, but. From me, Will Watson.
From me, Alexander Blaine. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great evening. Good night.